In 30 seconds, you will be witness to one of the greatest online events in the history of, well, online events. Descript proudly brings to you a topic that you deeply care about and whose name is the title of this online event. I'm Don. I am not your host. I am an overdub stock voice included for free with Descript. So, now, let's meet someone who actually works here.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our live stream. We are thrilled to be here, and thank you so much for taking time out of your day. Today, the topic of our webinar is Back to School, Make the Most of Virtual and Hybrid Classrooms. So to kick off, I thought I'd introduce myself and then Harmony, and then we'll get right into the meat of our content. So my name is Mickey. I'm part of the business development team here at Descript. And I specifically spend a lot of my time focused on education. And part of the reason for that is that while I'm working at Descript, I'm also pursuing an MBA. And I started my degree last year. And so like many other students, it was the first time that I had experienced virtual education. And there were certain things that my professors did that made the experience so much better, so much more engaging. And so I'm personally very passionate about helping students and educators get access to Descript and learn how this tool can really help them in their classrooms. So that's a little bit about me. Harmony, I'll kick it over to you.
Thanks so much, Mickey. Hey, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Harmony Jarudek, and I'm one of the customer success managers and product specialists here at Descript. And so for those of you that are joining today, you might be asking, what is Descript? In a nutshell, it's a collaborative audio and video editor that works like a Google Doc. And so in my previous life, I've developed a number of online courses, MOOCs, massive open online courses, been in that world for about 10 years or so, also worked in various learning management systems. And so I think the thing that's so exciting about being at Descript is having a tool that we can make available to educators, staff, faculty, students, something that takes a really holistic approach to creating content, easily editing it, and then publishing it. And when it comes to publishing, making it accessible. So as we return to campus, we're filming content, we're trying to make content engaging, interspersing different activities so that students feel like they're still connected to that live classroom. There's a lot of different things that can be done in Descript. So I'm really excited to be chatting with this particular audience today. Educators, this is the tool for you, and we're really excited to show the true power of it and have our guest today talk about his experience in Descript.
Excellent. So I think at this time we can introduce our guest. We are super lucky today to have Dan here. Dan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Dan Frank. I teach writing at UCSB. And my main research interest whenever I'm teaching and anything I'm continually trying to research is how do we learn in the current era, in this online, digitally connected, active, constantly accelerating era. And that's how I have shaped how do I learn myself, and that's what I continually grapple with in my classrooms.
Excellent. So I think we're now ready to kick off into our agenda. So we're going to share our slides here. We can probably go to the next one if that's all right. Maybe even two forward. Awesome. So today, here's what we'll be covering. First, we're going to give you a super brief intro on virtual learning, past and present. And I know everyone here is involved in education, and virtual learning is no longer new to any of us. So we won't dwell on this for too long, but we do want to do a little bit of level setting here. Then we'll talk in depth about Descript, and Harmony gave you sort of the very broad 30,000 foot view of what we're doing, but we'll really kind of dig into the tool and what some of the main features are. Then we're going to hear from Dan about some best practices in the classroom, and then we'll make sure to leave lots of time for Q&A. So to kick off, though, we want to make sure that we hear from all of you, and we want to start with this question. So what is the single best piece of advice that you'd give to another educator regarding virtual instruction? So you can go ahead and post in the chat. Feel free to let us know what school you're coming from if you'd like to. And to give us an example, Dan, do you want to share what your best piece, the best piece of advice that you would give is?
Yeah, the best piece of advice is to really think about the modality of whatever mode you're teaching in and to embrace the features of that modality, not to try to take the modality of, say, an in-person classroom and all the features of that paradigm and try to force those features onto a new modality. I like to talk about the idea of a skeuomorph, which is artificial features on a new piece of technology to make it resemble the old technology, like stitches on leather, artificial stitches that are just carved in because we expect them there, but they're not needed anymore. So my big advice is to think what in your teaching is skeuomorphic right now. What fights are you fighting that maybe you don't even have to fight? And how do you embrace, as Marshall McLuhan says, that the medium is the message, more fully to really think about the way that your asynchronous or your hybrid class works, think about the features of that and best embrace those features.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that awesome example, Dan. Folks in the chat, feel free to post what your best advice is. We want to make sure that we're sharing a lot of knowledge here. So feel free to post that, or really questions as well. So you're also welcome to share challenges that you might have faced in the last year, questions you have, and we'll be happily answering those as we go along. So to move along with our agenda today, we can talk a little bit about virtual learning past and present. And so obviously, in the last year and a half since the pandemic, it's become very common to many of us, virtual learning. But I think it's worth noting that virtual learning actually has a longer history. So by 2019, pre-pandemic, there were already 7 million students in the US who were enrolled in distance learning programs. And many institutions, including Ivy League schools and other very prestigious programs, were already offering a lot of virtual classes. 46% of higher ed faculty were teaching virtually. And so there really is sort of a longer history to virtual learning that predates the pandemic. That said, as we know, COVID has really accelerated the move to virtual learning, and it sort of has forced our hand in a lot of ways for educators and for students to really get used to this new way of learning and this new way of teaching. But on the flip side, it's also encouraged a lot of innovation. And so, Descript is just one of many tools that is now available to educators and is really helping create a virtual classroom that is engaging and effective for all students. So we talked a little bit about the past of virtual education, but where are we today? So for the 2021 school year, in a survey of around 3,000 higher ed institutions, 10% reported opening fully online, 34% were primarily online, and 21% were hybrid. And so it's still at over half of all higher ed institutions that are offering a significant amount of instruction virtually. And so while a lot of learning and a lot of innovation has certainly happened in the last year and a half and prior to that as well, there is still a lot of room and a lot of space to grow. And we're really kind of seeing that virtual learning, while it was something that the pandemic certainly has accelerated, it's now really here to stay. And there are some very exciting parts of virtual learning that are now accessible and are part of the educational programs that were not even possible before. So that's sort of a brief history of where virtual learning has come and where we're moving in the future. And I think my goal for all of you today is to really understand that hybrid education and virtual education offers a lot of opportunities. And while it does offer challenges, there's also so much exciting stuff. And it really offers a lot of opportunities for students to get even more out of the classroom. And so we're really excited to hear from Dan about all of those tips. But before we do that, I will pass it over to Harmony to give you a bit more of a deep dive on Descript and the tools that are part of the editing suite.
Thanks, Mickey. So I'm really excited to just give a brief overview, and then I want to go ahead and dig in with Dan and look at some of the content that he's created for his students for this semester. But to set the stage, and for anyone that might just be joining just now, once again, Descript, it's a collaborative audio and video editor, and you can edit your audio and video just as easily as editing a text document. So in terms of thinking about how educators are using it, it's going in, removing those filler words, those word gaps, going ahead and extracting perhaps just the SRT or VTT files that you need to put into your LMS, how you can easily create slideshows, and even I'll talk a little bit about our overdub feature that what allows you to go in and correct a single word without having to go back and fully record a lecture here. So what we're seeing here on the screen, this is a Descript project, and projects are very flexible in that you can upload audio or video, and then you edit them the same, just like you would in a document. So here's the real magic of Descript. I've loaded in a webinar that Jay and I did. We recorded it, and then if you go and create a new composition is an arrangement of, let's say, a lecture that you've recorded. So you just simply drag an MP4 in, and then what Descript will do is it'll automatically transcribe it. And so you get about 95% accuracy. So with that, you want to go in and know some tips and tricks to kind of get your content really tight, effective, and concise. So some of the magic here is that in this case, we wanted the talk to start here where I say, hey, everyone. So all you have to do is highlight it. We want to get rid of this first part and delete it. So if we take a look down here in the timeline, that's removed the underlying audio and video. So you're copying and pasting your audio and video just like you would in a text document. So I'll go ahead and undo just so we can see what happened there. So we see down here in the timeline that got removed. Another thing that we could do, perhaps, let's say I wanted to take this first portion, I want to delete it from the front, but maybe I want to add it to the very end. So just put my cursor there, paste it, and now we see that audio and video has gotten shifted to the very end of this composition. So really easy to move your content around efficiently within one composition. Another thing that you might do is, to Dan's point, and he's going to be talking about his own experience here, is what are some of the things you can do to start cleaning up your learning content. So in this case, I might want to remove some filler words. You can either right click on that or go over to the search to remove and just start removing those pesky filler words. And you can choose which ones you want to throw out. Sometimes filler words are great and they're important and meaningful for the content sometimes. So maybe I just want to get rid of those ums and uhs, and I'll go ahead and either delete them or ignore them. So really easy to just pull those out and get right to the point with your content. Another thing you could do is perhaps remove some of those word gaps. So I know when creating tutorials, you might have some awkward pauses, or you need to look down at your notes for a transition. So you can, let's say, find anything longer than a second and then shorten it down to perhaps half a second, but you can customize that. Another thing, in thinking about getting your content ready for your students, you're most likely going to have terminology or perhaps acronyms that you're using in class that perhaps the transcription misses the first time around. So what you can do is we have what's called a transcription glossary that you can use to train the AI over time. So I'm going to use my favorite keyboard shortcut. So if you learn one keyboard shortcut, this is it. If you're on a Mac, Command K, and if you're on Windows, Control K. That brings up our conductor. And this is basically how you tell Descript what you'd like to do. So in this case, I want to pull up our glossary. So we can add those terms here that might get missed first time around with transcription. So add those in here, and you'll get that right the next time. All right. And then I'm going to go ahead and shift over to this particular composition. And we're going to see this in some of Dan's work too. Once you pull in your lecture, you can easily add in slides, assets. We can add in captions here. So you'll notice that we have some additional tracks down here. So it's of course important to ensure that your content is accessible for your students. So it's as easy as highlighting all of your text. I'm going to do Command K again. I'm going to say captions. All right, and so now we've got those captions burned in. We can move those around. And we'll notice that we have a pin track here. And so I'm going to click on that, go into the inspector, and now you can customize the look and feel of this to match themes for your course. So perhaps I want to change that background color. So you can go in, make it your own, customize the look and feel of those captions. And so as you go through your lecture material, what you might want to drop in some slides. So you'll see those down here in the timeline. We also, when we're ready to start sharing it out, there's a number of ways to get your content out of Descript. So you can export just those subtitles, pull those into your LMS. You can also choose a page export, which will create a share URL where you can go in and view that video. It'll follow along in the interactive transcript, and you can actually iframe this into your LMS. So if you have questions about that, we'd love to give you some feedback there. But oftentimes what you might need to do is extract both your video content. So you could do an MP4 export and then pair that with your subtitles, or just perhaps a full transcript export of your content. So easy, very easy to get all sort of aspects of your lecture material out of Descript in different formats. All right. The last thing I'll mention before I kick it back over to Mickey and Dan is I want to talk a little bit about our screen recorder. So this allows you to create, you can be in your home, in your classroom, and this will allow you to record either your screen. So you can do a selection of your desktop or a full webcam recording. And I'll just do a quick little test here just so you can see how easy it is. So you can choose to have your camera enabled and show a little head bubble here. Great. And we have transcription enabled. So what that means is once we complete our screen recording, we're going to be able to edit it just like we are seeing here in a Descript project. So I'm going to start my screen recording. I'll select the range in which I want to record. Maybe I don't want to record the full desktop. So I'm going to select that, start recording. All right. Hey, we're on today's webinar talking to Mickey and Dan, talking about how to make learning content accessible for your virtual classroom. Okay, I'll go ahead and stop recording now. And what I'm going to get back shortly is our quick editor, which will allow me to do a fairly quick review of the content that I just recorded, and I'll be able to edit my recording here. Excellent. Here's our quick editor. It's transcribing essentially in real time, and now I'll be able to go in, make some edits. Probably had some filler words in there. Excellent. Here's my video. And the nice thing is that if I needed to just perhaps add a quick intro to an existing video, I could record that here. I could copy that, come into my other composition, and I can simply just paste that right on in. So now it's pasted that underlying audio and video, and easy enough to throw in. So that's the screen recorder, really easy to create a quick lo-fi recording right here in Descript, in addition to all of the other editing capabilities. All right, I think, Mickey, what do you think? Should we toss it over to Dan? We can start taking a look at some of his projects.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Excellent. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this. And Dan, let's go ahead and I've got your week 2 project up here. Do you want to maybe set the stage here and talk us through how you got to creating this material?
Yeah, so this is just an example day of instruction that I'll send out. This is the lecture that I send out on week 2 of a writing course. This is a writing 2 course, so it's kind of a first-year writing type of curriculum. And what I want to show with this lecture is basically all the moves that I make when I have recorded, I've made a PowerPoint, I've recorded myself talking through the PowerPoint, I put it into Descript, then I edited it, I cleaned it up, and then I would add on to that lecture with additional imagery. And in the end, what I have here is a pretty snappy, fully transcribed talk through, responding to work, setting up the new projects of the week, and just diving into the class content. If you wanted to like just play the beginning part.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, hello, welcome back. So good to be with you again. How are you doing? How are you feeling? You doing good? You hanging in there? We are in week 2, Wednesday. We're already sliding down to finish up week 2. We're already almost 2 weeks done. Amazing. Just amazing how it moves.
Okay, so as you can see, I try to put on a good show. I try to, really reach out, grab their attention. That's a thing that a lot of times we kind of forget is I had the thought recently that it's only in education do we not think that, if a student isn't paying attention, it's their fault. In every other presentation out there, the impetus is on you to really fight for that attention. Yet the traditional paradigm of education is everyone sits in a classroom and if they're not paying attention, they need to do better. Well, I kind of think teachers need to do better to really, constantly make this as engaging as possible. What I like about Descript is the stuff that I send out is accessible and can be parsed along multiple modalities. A student can read this fully edited transcript as they listen to me, as they see my face, and as they see the visuals that I show on the screen. So you have all these modalities working at once. I grew up on this quote from Edgar Dale. I don't know if you've ever heard this. It goes like, we remember 10% of what we read, 20% of what we hear, 30% of what we see, 50% of what we see and hear, 80% of what we experience, and 95% of what we actually teach. That's actually not real data. Edgar Dale never said those percentages. That's literally just a meme. But the idea behind it is true in my experience. Over and over again, the more modalities you can use at once, the better they're going to retain. So another fun thing I want to share about this lecture, if you wanted to scroll down to where I started adding some pictures. So here I just started freewheeling in my original recording, talking about rhetoric, which is, a core concept in my writing classroom. First, I talked about rhetoric, and then I went back. And a cool thing about Descript is I can just do like a Google image search. I can copy an image, select the sentence where I'm talking about that image, and paste that image right into my transcript, and then the image appears. So if we wanted to play just this first section.
Yeah, let's do it.
The main thing that I'm picking up in your responses is the kind of novelty of the idea that writing is much more than writing on a paper in one certain way. In fact, rhetoric is everywhere. So you're all kind of picking that up, and the lens of digital writing and its multimodality and multi-genre approaches really does help show the idea that everything is written, everything is writing, even from things that you think wouldn't be writing at all, like performing, like wearing clothes. We're communicating all the time, whether we want to or not, whether we mean to or not. And so that's one of the first points I got from the reading, is this idea that rhetoric is everywhere, okay? We are rhetorical beings. Animals are rhetorical beings too. My cat, whether she's meowing or just sitting there looking at me or, chittering at the window, she's communicating. She's performing rhetoric too. There's reason for everything.
As you can see, just by throwing in a video clip from my phone in that, so I get to make my students see my cat as often as possible. It was really easy to just select that sentence when I was talking about my cat, paste the video in, and then it appears. And so I feel that, you have all these modalities working at once, and it's moving at a good clip.
Yeah, I think I love what you're talking about in terms of involving people's senses, hearing, seeing, reading, etc. Because I think having been a student in a virtual classroom for the past year, all of a sudden you're competing for attention with a lot of other things, right? In a normal classroom, I'm normally not allowed to even have my laptop open. In a virtual classroom, I have to be using laptop and my internet, which means I probably have my email up, probably have something else, a bunch of other windows going on. I've got my monitor, I've got my phone sitting next to me. There are a lot of other distractions going on. And so I think to your point of involving all these different senses, that's the kind of thing that really keeps the student very engaged and helps minimize the temptation to, scroll through Instagram or whatever it might be, which obviously in a live classroom, you can kind of prevent that kind of behavior a lot more easily. So I definitely buy into the idea of involving people's senses just to make sure that they're staying super engaged and also retaining that information afterward.
And Dan, would you mind talking a little bit about some of the response that you've had from your students, in thinking about how you've been using Descript? I'm curious, how has the response changed, if any, since you've been in person to more of this hybrid model?
They've loved the Descript lectures that I've been sending out. They love that transcript. They love being able to follow along. They love that they can search the transcript, and they love that they could, they could copy the transcript for their notes. So when I give a paragraph like the one above, they could just copy that full paragraph, put it into their notes, reference it later. So they love how it's really easy for them to go back. The affordances of asynchronous learning are that you get to put the learning on your conditions rather than trying to say, okay, everyone has to be quiet and not be hungry and not be tired and listen to me now. Instead, students can go, all right, I've got my coffee, I'm ready. And at their own pace, they can take breaks whenever they want. That's fine. The transcript lets them come back exactly to where they left off, or makes it super easy to go, oh, I zoned out for that last sentence. What was that sentence? They click on that sentence, then they go back to me saying that sentence. So that's what they love the most, is that super always on and interactive transcripts, for sure.
Should we go ahead and pull up an example of what one of those pages looks like? Oh, and I see we have a question here. Do you post both the video and the transcript in your LMS?
Yes, I publish it. And that published page is great because it shows the video and it shows the full transcript. And, that transcript highlights what I'm saying when I say it. When the publishing works, it usually works.
Yeah, and we actually have some pretty cool updates coming with our embedded player in a release or two. So to Dan's point, you'll be able to publish that page, follow along in the interactive transcript. So there'll be some additional capabilities in terms of how you can embed that into your LMS. Great question.
The commenting on the published page works great too. So students can get a free account, and then they can just highlight one of the sentences I said, ask a question about it, and I'll get alert of that in my email. Then I can respond to their question. So that's another way that makes something that in its core form was very one way, makes it a lot more interactive and dialectical.
Absolutely. I'll go ahead and pull up just so that we can see an example of what one of these look like. Well, actually, we'll go ahead and we can look at that a little bit later. But just to Dan's point with the commenting piece of things, similarly, just the way that you can go into an existing Descript project, you just highlight the portion that maybe I wanted to ask Dan about his use here, about the choices that he was making. You just highlight it, and then you can go ahead and add a comment here. Maybe I want to start off at the very beginning. Maybe we want to touch on it here. You can go ahead and right-click, add a comment. Really easy enough to just sort of use it just as you would a Google Doc, if that makes sense. Nice. Dan, I think we have a couple other examples here. Should we go ahead and pull those up?
So yeah, just briefly, if people were interested in my workflow, The other things that I had to show are just raw video files that I had just recorded and just put it into Descript. And I could basically just kind of talk about how I take that raw file and the first few moves that I make with it. So here's an example. So in this, what I do is, I kind of already said it, but I make my PowerPoint. Then I set up some recording, like even Zoom, it's a great recorder. Or, you know, the Descript built-in webcam recording like that. And I turn it on, and then I just talk as I work through the content. And what's nice is I know how easy it will be to edit it in post. For example, taking out all the pauses in one go. So in that first stage, when I'm just recording, I don't sweat if I mess up. If I stutter on a sentence or something, I'll just say the sentence again and keep moving on, knowing how easily it'll be to see that previous aborted sentence and delete it. If I need to stop and gather my thoughts for up to a minute, I can, because I know that will immediately get taken out. So what I do is I bring in the raw file, and then I get something that looks like this. The first thing that I do is I remove filler words. And as was demonstrated, I actually just remove and I find that even saying "you know" can be rhetorical and can, you know, add to the dialectical nature of my communication, but nobody needs to hear me say So I just take all those out and delete those in one go. Then I remove all the pauses. And that's the word gaps, longer than a second. I keep it at that. I just automatically delete all of that. Then I'm going to change the speed of my clip to 1.5. That moves at a good clip that I can still hear what I'm saying, but it'll okay, so there's actually two types of speed, right? What's happening here is actually changing the speed of the clip itself. I set that to 1.3. And that's what I send out to my students, is me talking at 1.3. Just helps move it along a little bit at a better jaunt. You know, I can't stand to hear myself talk at 1-to-1 speed. So why would I subject my students to that? You know, so I speed that up to 1.3. Students can actually even speed that up faster from the player on their ends. And if not for that interactive transcript, I would have been kind of leery about that. But because they can read along and go back so easy and reference everything I say, I am not concerned at how fast they want to read it. You know, they listen to it. But I edit it at 1.5 speed so that I can really quickly get through what I'm saying. So I set it to 1.5, and then I just go through. As I talk, I start cleaning it up with the correct tool. That's where you highlight what you want to change, you hit E, and then that will let you change the words, make sure that everything is transcribed correctly.
So just to demonstrate, go into a project here, highlight what you'd like, and then go ahead and make that change right here in the pop-up. So I'll have this pulled up so we can demonstrate some of what you're talking through here, Dan. Yeah.
So it makes it very easy just to, oh, that didn't transcribe correctly. I selected, I hit E, I fix it. Mixed in with that is just as I say it, I edit it to make sure it's actually saying what I said. And then in the same move, I'm also deleting the sentences that I had to repeat, or taking a whole paragraph. Like on the screen, you can see the third paragraph down, I'm saying I'm behind on grading. I don't need to say that necessarily. I don't need to admit any weaknesses. I could just select that sentence, delete it, and I never said it. So those are the main moves I do when I start to process a raw lecture to make it into that snappy, interactive, multimodal thing that you saw with what was first presented. It also works great for responding to student papers, and that's in the other thing that I shared right here. So what you can do is, well, what I'll do is I get a student paper, and I put on my screen recording tool. I take the pen tool in my PDF annotation, and I just talk as I read. And I start circling things. It's interesting that it's not showing up in the preview.
Let's see here. Go ahead and try to play. I'll give it a little refresh.
Sure.
So while we're reloading, Dan, so you mentioned when you're recording, you just turn on the screen recorder and it's essentially kind of a stream of consciousness. Are you doing any sort of outlining in Descript beforehand, or are you working off like a pre-existing outline elsewhere? Where does Descript fall into that sort of building out or planning for your lecture?
With a lecture, first I make the PowerPoint. And the PowerPoint will parse out all the different topics that I want to talk about, and will have embedded in it the different things I want to show. And that is the extent of the planning of my lecture, because then I'll just, as was said, I'll turn on the recorder, pull up the slide, and just start, extemporizing. Because I know I can then clean up, take the greatest hits of whatever I monologued myself into, get rid of all the stuff that might be slowing it down. That's the basic workflow right there.
Got it. That great. I think that's maybe a common workflow for other instructors, but you tell us. Jump into the chat. Let us know how you plan for the classroom. So would love to hear from folks listening in on what your process looks like. Great.
Something else I've heard, Dan, I'm not sure if you've done this yourself before, is that when folks are kind of recording something as a stream of consciousness, they use a certain phrase or kind of verbal motif to indicate when they like a take that they just did. So if I repeat the same sentence 4 times, I say, oh, the last one is the best or something, to kind of indicate to myself in my transcript which one is the best. So instead of even needing to kind of read in depth in the transcript or listen back to it, I have verbal cues that then become written cues for me to identify the best moments.
That's
so that's
cool.
something I've heard from some other people that kind of really speeds up their workflow too, as they're kind of searching for those, best takes or best moments, whatever it might be.
That's great. Yeah, I never did that. I always just take the last take.
Wonderful. Well, I'm having a little hard time getting the page to reload. So maybe in terms of maybe the demo feedback editing composition, was there anything else, Dan, that in thinking about your process, how you go about sort of tightening this up before then sharing with the student?
Yeah. So I guess we can't see it. Imagine if you wanted to, a student paper would just be pulled right up. Right. And, with my pen tool, I'd be underlining, I'd be circling sections of the paper and just talking about what I am seeing. And the nice thing about that is I could just say, oh, this part might need to be rephrased. And when I say this, it's actually showing exactly me circling, one of the words on the student paper. That makes it so easy to just, it feels like I'm sitting with the student and literally pointing to the paper and talking to them about it. I think in terms of being online and asynchronous, that is doing this, what I'm talking about here, is as close as possible to actually just sitting with the student, talking about their paper. And I do all the same things we talked about. I take out the pauses and I take out the filler words, and what the student gets then is a pretty snappy kind of me teleporting all over their paper, talking about it, responding to it. And the basic workflow is I comment as I read, and then at the end of that, I go back and talk about the paper as a whole. And they love this style of feedback. Regularly, they say, I've never had an instructor go this in depth with my papers before. And what's funny is it didn't take me any more time to give this what feels like full personalized lecture for the student. It doesn't take me any additional time to respond in this way than it did back in the old ways of annotating, a paper and typing my comments. That took longer than this, where I could actually say much more. And in saying much more, the students get all those comments, and it did not cost me extra energy or time.
It's fantastic. And then you're also kind of building up this archive of
Yes.
feedback that you're, over the course of the semester, you can look back and kind of see like what were some of perhaps the reoccurring themes that were might be happening with this cohort of students versus this upcoming semester. You'd be able to compare and contrast. So I think that's a great tip in terms of how you can save time and continue to provide feedback in a meaningful way to students. I love that.
Dan, it's clear that I was going to say it's clear that you've come sort of such a long way with Descript, and you're obviously such a pro now. I'm curious if there were any things at the beginning of your Descript journey that you either didn't know were available or didn't understand, and sort of a couple months in found something and you thought, oh well, that really kind of improves the experience. Any sort of tips and tricks that you sort of wish you had known from the outset?
Well, I've been along with the journey of Descript, like when it launched, in this video form a year ago, and a year and change ago. So I've just been on the precipice of every major change they made. The biggest change was in that editing workflow, because there was a time when the editing mode and then the text correction mode were these two different planes, and you had to move from plane to plane in order to make corrections to the transcript. So the big change there in synthesizing the editing and the text correction so you could do it in one go with keyboard shortcuts, that was huge. That really helped me speed up my editing and made it a lot more enjoyable. And the evolution of the player, the published player page, that's been really nice too. Back when I started, students had very little control over that page, even in the size of the video window. They were asking me, can I speed it up? And I was saying, no, you can't, I'm sorry. That original player was so limited that I wasn't even using it. I was exporting to YouTube so that I could give students more control. But they've added so many awesome features to that player, just in terms of, students can so easily move from header to header, because the headers that I make get baked into the timeline, which is great. So they can click on that. They can, of course, set it to whatever speed they want to listen to it on. They can, as we talked about, make comments. So every feature that has been rolling out here has been great. And I think that the program gets better and better.
And Dan, what sort of advice would you give to educators out there if they've just downloaded Descript and they're not quite sure where to start? What would be sort of your first few tips to educators getting started?
Probably I'd advise just start exploring the tutorials. I think the first thing you gotta get in your mind is how the workflow works. How do you start making quick edits and text corrections? I think those are just the first steps there, because once you get an idea of how it works, of what goes in, of how it gets cleaned up, and what goes out, I think just understanding that's going to get anybody using this to start stepping up their game in terms of the quality of the material they send out.
That's great advice. And yeah, to Dan's point, for those of you that maybe have the app open and are following along, down in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little question mark. If you click on that, that'll bring up our Learning Center. There's lots of tutorials here. I would say get started with transcription. That'll walk you through some of the basics as far as what does it look like to pull in content, how you go about making some corrections. As Dan mentioned, you go ahead and use the E key. It's a very simple keyboard shortcut. And then if you're trying to get familiarized with some of the other keyboard shortcuts, there's a quick access here. So lots of different resources to help make the most out of your time in the app. It's a great tip. And then Dan, from your perspective, thinking about your students, are your students using it in any capacity? Thinking about like final projects or classroom assignments. Have your students experimented with it at all?
I keep inviting them to. I think I'm going to start pushing them harder to do it because I really like it when they edit something in Descript and they send it out. A lot of my work, I send out an assignment and then I kind of say, you can choose the modality that you answer this assignment in. And one of the modalities that I want to continue to push my students into is, the edited video or the video talk. They get examples of a video talk with every lecture I send out. So they, there's a built-in scaffolding right there and modeling. The students who do dive into Descript, there's a bit of an intimidating learning curve to it. There's just no way out of that. But once they do, they produce a really cool thing. I've gotten ad parodies where they take stock image and they put that stock imagery together. They write a script and then they use the voice tool, the overdub. They use like Dawn, in a world, and they make fake movie trailers and advertisements. And what's really cool is all those features of the Descript published page are there. So once again, they're showing things, they're talking about things, and they're writing too. That written part comes up right alongside whatever they put out. I've taught a public speaking class, and I've had a few of the more adventurous students do their speeches and edit them in Descript, and the result has been fantastic.
I love that. I love to hear the different ways students are getting creative with the app and even delving into overdub. I think that's great to hear that students are starting to play and experiment with those different features.
Yeah, I love the idea of using this for a public speaking class because I feel like that's something that in sort of a virtual environment feels very different. So yeah, I love to hear that that's become part of the curriculum as well. And I think there can be this hurdle for editing video for the first time, where if you've never done it before, it can seem very intimidating. And even for myself, right? I don't come from a professional video editing background at all. But once you kind of get started in Descript, I think it does become so intuitive. And there was a word that you used a few minutes ago, Dan, which was you said that the editing process has become enjoyable for you. And I think that's kind of a really cool place that I think if more students can kind of get to that point where editing is not just something that they have to do, it's something that they enjoy doing, whether editing a paper or editing a presentation, et cetera, that editing is really kind of a very enjoyable part of the creation process. And it's not something to be sort of feared or dreaded or anything else. It can actually be something to look forward to.
That's the dream. That is the dream.
Well, as you're seeing down on the bottom of the screen, please, for anyone listening in, please drop in your questions. We're going to be here for about another 10 minutes, so we'd love to field any questions you might have about Descript or for Dan too, in terms of best practices in the app or how he's been using it to date and prepping for the fall. Mickey, as you're going into the fall semester, thinking about some of the work that you have coming up, how do you envision perhaps using it, or how might it figure into like some of the projects you have in mind for this upcoming fall?
Absolutely. So I think I think about it in two ways. And Dan, you're obviously coming at it from the educator perspective, so please jump in too. In the school that I'm at, we're sort of doing a mainly hybrid approach where we're doing some in person, some classes are still virtual. And I think what it's kind of transforming into is sort of a best of both worlds kind of a situation where, as Dan has been talking about, there are a lot of benefits to virtual asynchronous learning. And so maybe a class that in the past was 2.5 hours long is now an hour and 20 minutes long. And that extra content is being distributed via a pre-recorded video that I can consume at a time that works for me, when I'm most engaged, etc. And then my class time is just really focused on being super interactive and doing group work and that kind of thing. So that's something that I personally love, is that a lot of that lecture time is now becoming asynchronous, and the classroom time is just all interactive. So that's what I'm personally seeing in my program in terms of classes. And in terms of sort of projects I'm working on and things like that, as an MBA student, we have all kinds of public speaking engagements and all kinds of pitch presentations and that kind of thing. And so I certainly use Descript for anything involving audio or video. But I also use it for collaboration. So I obviously encourage my classmates to try it out, and it's really kind of a great way for us to be able to collaborate on things and comment on each other's work, et cetera. So I think a lot of what Dan is describing in his classroom is very much carrying over into my experience as well. And yeah, I'm thrilled with the progress that I've seen over the course of the last 12 months and in my experience as a student. And I think going forward, it's really about the best of both worlds. It's taking the best of what virtual education can bring and then retaining some of the really good parts of in-person instruction too.
Totally.
So I think we have a couple of questions here that we can answer. So we've got one up on the page here. Is there a size limit on the published page?
It's a great question. So there isn't. So here's the nice thing with Descript is there isn't any limit on the amount of media that you can upload or export. So when you go to publish your page, so for example, if I'm ready to get this ready for primetime share, export, and I'll choose page, I can, couple of things here. I can choose whether I want to allow for comments, so you can toggle that on or off. In the case of wanting to show that interactive transcript, I also have that toggled on. And then you can set some permissions here. So by default, it will be unlisted, or you can make it public or restricted to just folks that have access to that project. So to that question, no limits. And that's the nice thing about working in Descript. You can set up a folder structure that's going to be most conducive to your workflow. So perhaps different folders, different projects for different classes. And actually maybe, Dan, is that how do you keep your class content organized in Descript?
I didn't for all too long, and now I'm finally starting to make folders for my different classes. So, but you can and that's coming up pretty new too, is the extent of control you have over your drive. You can start building folders. And so now what I have is a folder for each quarter, and then within that, a folder for all the materials for a class. So that'll have my lectures for the entire quarter. As I do them, they all go into that folder. Also, any responses to student papers and work, that'll go into that folder too.
Very cool. Yeah, so here's a really quick example. So we just like the Descript project, we have the video that we can watch. We can follow along here in the interactive transcript. I can go ahead and, if I want to highlight something in particular, I want to comment, just add that here. And you can mention them. That way they'll get notified that they've left a comment for you, and you can pop in to the published page and take a look. So just so that folks can see an example of what one of those published pages looks like. Yeah, great question. From Tim, when dropping in a slide or image over recorded audio, is it simple to change or remove that slide at the end of the audio segment? Definitely, yeah. So you can, to Dan's point, depending on where you want where you want to drop in your content here, you can, once you have an asset in here, let's say I want to go ahead and move perhaps this image here, I can just simply drag it into the script where I want to display it, and then it's as simple as that. So you've just shifted that slide or that asset in the presentation. So we see it's now corresponding down here in the timeline. So just go ahead and find that pin track and drag it where you'd like it to display in your presentation.
And I mentioned that already, but you could highlight a sentence and drag the image right onto that highlighted sentence, and that's awesome. That's one of the more little, oh my god, this program's magic moments is you highlight a sentence, you drag an image right onto the sentence, or a clip right onto the sentence, and then it's only there for that sentence. So really cool, really speeds things up.
Absolutely. Yeah, great question. Can you add backgrounds like Zoom allows? So there isn't like a built-in green screen effect yet, but you know, to the question about, you know, pulling in additional assets, you could pretend, you know, let's say you wanted to shrink this down a little bit, and then you could pop in, let's say, a background image, place that right behind there. So great feature idea, as you see down in the bottom. Go to feedback.dscript.com. We'd love to hear your requests. But one way of accomplishing that would be to maybe adjust the size of your video and then drag in an image that you'd like to have behind you. Nice. Let's see here. Can you tell a little bit about the studio effect feature? Great. I think this is talking about studio sound here. So I'm happy to play a little demo here if you'd like. So studio sound, it removes noise, background, enhances your speech. So for example, if Mickey and I and Dan were all doing an interview on Zoom and we're all recording our audio individually, if I have like a loud air conditioner in the background, studio sound, with one click, you can clean up your audio. So I've got a little example here. If we'd like to take a quick listen, we'll go ahead and listen to a recording with studio sound on and then without.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public.
So we can hear that difference. It's pretty disparaging, right? That, you know, so what you can do is once you pull, let's say, the recording into Descript, you can go into your project files. So this is where all of your source material exists in Descript. So let's say I want to go into this one. This is where I need to clean it up. It's just a simple checkbox. So once you check that off, it'll apply studio sound. Depending on the length of your file, it might just take a couple seconds longer. But then once you've checked that off, it'll apply that effect. Great question. All right, we're coming up on the last few minutes. So if anyone else has any other questions, please feel free to drop them in. But Mickey, how do you feel about closing us out?
Yeah, that sounds great. So thank you all for joining us today, and especially a huge thanks to Dan. Harmony and I have learned so much from you, just in terms of your workflow as an educator, and thank you for sharing that wisdom with our community as well. We've got one final slide, if we can pop that up by any chance, that has some closing information. But in general, there are a lot of different resources for anyone who has further questions. So you can always visit our help center, which is help.dscript.com, or you can also chat us at support@dscript.com. Another place that you can reach us is our Discord community. This is a great place to ask questions, but also to see what other people are working on and what their ideas are. So feel free to join us at discord.dscript.com. Share the ways that you're using Descript in the classroom, and feel free to tag me and Harmony. We would love to make sure that we're catching any comments related to education. So feel free to go ahead and tag us. And then finally, it is September. It's back to school time. And so we just published a blog post that's also dedicated to this topic. And so I'd really encourage you all to check it out. It's got some really good tips on just sort of teaching in a virtual classroom in general. Some are specific to Descript, but many are just sort of more overarching ideas of ways that you can make a classroom very engaging, regardless of if it's virtual or in person. So those are our closing thoughts for you. Thank you again for joining, and thank you, Dan. Hopefully we'll see you again soon. And good luck to everyone who's teaching this year.
Thanks. This was super fun.
Thanks so much, Dan. Thank you all for tuning in today. We look forward to seeing you on an upcoming webinar.